Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. Today my guest is Marco Vighi. He's a researcher at the IMDEA Water Institute. We're going to be talking about microplastics and how they are taking a toll on aquatic ecologies all over the world. So, Marco, thank you for coming. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks.
So tell me about your work. Are you studying aquatic ecology in general, or just microplastics? What's your work about?
Yes, I am an ecotoxicologist in general. I am working now in the IMDEA Water Institute. That is an institute working in water research, and I am the responsible of the Aquatic ecotoxicology research group. About microplastic, I am now involved in an European project on microplastics. So one of our research items are plastics and microplastics.
So microplastics come from where? How do they get into bodies of water?
But the project I am working now is a project on the water cycle in agriculture. So evaluating the risk in the water cycle from rivers, irrigation, agriculture, and back to surface water. This is more or less the cycle that we are studying. However, to understand this type of cycle, it is important to better understand in general the cycle, the origin of microplastic. But I think that in order to talk about microplastic, it is important to talk in general about plastics, because microplastics are only a component of the problem. The problem are plastic, and we have macro, micro, and nano plastic. In this scheme, in my opinion, microplastic are not the measure, are only a part of the general problem of plastic, probably the less relevant. The real problem are plastic on one side, on the bigger side. On the smaller side, there are nanoplastic that are the unknown, because we don't know anything about them. In between, there are the micro.
Well, so where do plastics come from? Is it that, how do they get to be micro and nano sized? If I throw away a soda bottle, how does it become microplastic or nanoplastic?
But there are two different types of microplastic in terms of their origin. There are the so-called primary microplastic. Primary microplastic are the microplastic intentionally produced. Is a material, a small spheres, plastic pellets of sphere that are added, for example, in cosmetics, in toothpaste, in other techniques. Then there are the secondary microplastic that are the microplastic non-intentionally produced, and they derive from the fragmentation of bigger plastic, of big items, bottles, and any other type of item made of plastic. That's for physical agents, erosion, light and temperature. Big plastic can be fragmented. In fragment, in smaller and smaller fragments up to the so-called microplastic. Microplastic are defined as the particle smaller than 5 millimeter, up to 1 micrometer. Below 1 micrometer are called nanoplastics. But this is an arbitrary definition because nanoplastic are not meaning comparable to nanomaterials. Nanomaterials are technological material of small dimension produced to have some particular properties and are used in many technological applications. Nanoplastics.
So what are some of the problems as plastics get smaller? What does it do to wildlife?
Plastics become smaller just due to physical agents.
But how does it affect fish
and
other life?
Please?
Yeah, fish. How does it affect fish, and birds and people as the plastics get smaller? Is there a certain range of size that is very bad?
Yeah, the problem is that we know we can study, we know something about relatively small particle of plastic, the so-called microplastic. But below a given size, it is practically impossible to study because there are no methods for sampling, for measuring, for the observation. We need for very, very complex tools and instruments. So below a given size, in general below 5-10 micrometer, it is extremely difficult to study this material, and we don't know practically anything. So nanoplastics are the unknown components of plastic.
Well, why are they so hard to study?
Please?
Why are they so hard to study? What is difficult about studying them?
So hard to study because there are no method for sampling and for measuring. So, for example, we don't know how many are present in the environment. We can sample and measure microplastic in a range, in the size range between some millimeter and some tenths of micrometer. So we can sample with nets, with several types of devices. We can measure and analyze with relatively complex analytical methods, but we can. On the contrary, for very small particles, in particular particles in the range of a few micrometers up to the nanometer range, we are not capable to measure. We have no instrument for measure them. So we don't know the concentration, the presence, how big, how high is the presence in the environment. We know which is the concentration of microplastic in water, for example. We can measure the concentration of microplastic in water, but we can't measure the concentration of nanoplastic in water. We don't know because we don't have the instrument capable to do it.
Do these plastics have charge? Can you use charge separation or filters, microfilters that could filter them out?
Yes, it is possible to collect by ultrafiltration, but you take note that we don't know how many they are. For example, for sampling microplastic in water, we have to filter in order to have a reliable sample with enough material to be analyzed. If we are measuring the concentration in relatively clean water, for example, marine water, lake water, river water, we have to filter several cubic meters on nets with relatively small mesh, but we can't filter cubic meter on some very small filters capable to retain nanoplastic. We can't filter 10 cubic meter on in ultrafiltration to retain nanoplastic. Then, if we could be capable to obtain this type of sample that is extremely complex, difficult, practically impossible, we can't measure, we can't analyze the amount of microplastic that are present.
What is the effect of micro and nanoplastics on living creatures?
Going to the effect. The effect is another problem. We know the effect of micro, and the effect of microplastic is very low. All tests performed on aquatic and terrestrial organisms, aquatic and terrestrial animals, indicate that at concentration that are ecologically realistic, this means concentration comparable to the concentration that we can find in the natural ecosystem, like rivers, lake, marine water, microplastic have practically no effect. It is practically impossible to assess adverse effects at concentration ecologically realistic. It is possible to assess adverse effects on aquatic animals, for example, only at concentration that are orders of magnitude higher than the environmentally realistic. But the problem is that the effect of plastic, of microplastic, of fragments of dimension in the range of a few millimeters up to some tenths of micrometers, the effect can be only a physical effect. They are not toxic. Plastic are by definition chemically inert, so are not toxicologically active. So the only possible effect of microplastic is a physical effect. And this may occur only at concentration very, very high. This means concentration that are much higher than the really occurring in the ecosystem. This is for micro. But for nano, we don't know if nanoplastic, it means fragments of the dimension of a few nanometer, we don't know if this material can enter into the cell. We don't know if...
Well, what about how bacteria interact with micro and nanoplastics? Has that been observed, that they attract bacteria?
Nanoplastic are, the size of nanoplastic is so small that are smaller than bacteria. Microplastic can attract. Bacteria can be absorbed on any solid support that can be found in water, can be found on wood surface, on any other type of surface, and also on plastic. So any solid support immersed in water can be covered by periphyton, by bacteria, and by microorganisms. When we are talking about nanoplastics, but nanoplastics are smaller than bacteria. And
well, have you found particular bacteria that are attracted to microplastics? Are there certain ones that eat the plastic, not just live on them?
Bacteria that eats the plastic. Sorry, it's quite noisy.
Yeah, are there bacteria that eat plastic or that that degrade it?
The degradation of plastic is an enormous problem. As far we know, plastics are not biodegradable. In general, bacteria are not capable to degrade plastic because they have not the enzyme capable to attack plastic. There is some recent literature about some organisms that can produce some enzyme capable to attack plastics, but this is still at the investigation level. Our knowledge about that is very scarce at the moment. it seems that something can attack and degrade plastics, but in general, bacteria that degrade organic matter cannot degrade plastic. This is one of the major characteristics of plastic, because the reason that produced the enormous amount of in our world in the last 70 years are several, because plastic have a lot of advantage. Plastic are cheap, not expensive, are versatile, can be produced in an enormous type of substances, of object of plastics, like films, like fibers, like rigid plastic, flexible plastic, are so cheap plastics that are excellent for disposable object or for packaging. So all these reasons make plastic one of the most important items in our life. And another characteristic is that plastic are persistent. So all objects made of plastic are long-lasting. This can be an advantage, but is also an enormous. Are persistent because cannot attacked by bacteria, as all other organic matter. So a plastic bag can survive, can remain not degraded through biodegradation for 100 years or more. So it's not degraded by bacteria, but can be fragmented, as I told before, can be fragmented by physical agents. So a plastic bag is transformed in small fragments, and so it is transformed in micro. The micro fragments are again fragmented up to the nanosize, and this is the destiny of plastic. If we consider that in the last 50 years, the amount of plastic is in the order of hundreds of millions of tons. I don't remember now the precise number, but it's an impressive number. So we can understand that the world now is invaded.
So what do you want to figure out about plastics specifically? What are you researching?
But in our research now, we studied, as I told before, the cycle of plastic in the agricultural system. For example, plastics are present in wastewater. Wastewater is treated in wastewater treatment plants, and treatment plants are capable to retain a large percentage of plastic. More or less, a wastewater treatment plant can retain up to 99% of microplastic present in untreated effluent. But this plastic retained are accumulated in the sludge of the treatment plant. The sludge is frequently used as a fertilizer in agriculture. And so the sludge applied in agricultural fields can release this microplastic in soil, can release microplastic through runoff, and runoff can bring this microplastic in surface water, in river, and up to the final receptor that in any case is the ocean, is the sea. So all plastic, macroplastic like bottle, bags, and so on, microplastic deriving from fragmentation in agriculture, in landfill, from urban runoff and other sources, everything is transported.
So it sounds like it's very important to get rid of the large plastic in any body of water because a large piece of plastic will degrade into millions of microplastic.
Yes, but to date, if we consider the effects of the different classes of plastic, there is the risk of macroplastic for marine animals, for example, is largely documented in the literature. Big marine animals like cetacean, like turtles, like birds, like big fish, eat plastic and can die through because plastic cannot be digested, and it is proven that the mortality of big animals determined by the ingestion of big plastic items like bags or bottles can produce intestinal occlusions and animals will die. For example, turtles eat intentionally plastic bags because a plastic bag floating can is similar to a jellyfish. Turtle eat jellyfish, and so they eat plastic bag because they appears like jellyfish. And if a turtle ingests a plastic bag, will die because an intestinal occlusion will. So big plastics are really a danger for big marine animals. Small plastics are not a danger for the moment because at the concentration that can be found in the environment, as I told before, it is impossible to observe any type of negative effect. Then the third level, the nano, may be dangerous, but we don't know. We can also make hypotheses because we cannot, it is also very difficult to make tests at concentration that are ecologically realistic. So on nanoplastic, we don't know almost anything.
So are you working with conservation groups or groups to help get rid of plastics in large plastics in bodies of water? Like, what do you think the first steps should be right now to try to reduce the problem?
But if we also consider that the risk for big plastic is documented, and if we consider that microplastic derive practically almost totally from the fragmentation of macroplastics, any type of intervention, of mitigation measure, of control measure should be done on the macroplastic. Because I told before that we know two types of microplastics, the primary and the secondary. But if we consider all sampling campaigns that have been performed in natural environment, primary microplastic represents a really small percent, usually less than 1%. The 99% of the total microplastic amount in the environment is determined by secondary microplastic, so by fragmentation of big items or fiber, for example. Any cycle of washing machine, domestic washing machine, produce millions of fiber coming from synthetic textiles. All these fibers go in wastewater and are distributed in the environment. This is another enormous source of microplastic. Another important source of microplastic are tire debris, and this derives mainly from the urban runoff. The debris of tires that are consumed and release small pieces on the street. All these small pieces are washed during rain events, are transported through runoff, go in surface water, in rivers, and this is another relevant component. So practically we have three major components of the secondary non-intentional microplastics that are fragmentation of bags, bottles, and other items, fibers from washing machines, and tire debris.
That's amazing. There's so many sources of stuff. What do you think is going to be the best way to handle this? To find new ways to filter water, or to stop the large plastics getting into the water system? But what about clothes? And it's hard to figure out what to do to help.
I think that the best way is to control plastic. Because now, for example, in Europe, there is a project for a regulation for controlling primary microplastics. So for controlling microbeds that are present in cosmetics. But this is not effective. It's not effective because are only a very small percentage of the total. So it's not really an effective mitigation. The most important measure will be the control of macro. For example, in Europe, this year, I don't know what will happen now with the COVID problems, but there is an European regulation that will totally ban in 2020 some disposable plastic item like glasses, and vessels, and other type of single-use items. This can be useful, but it's not enough. The majority of plastics that are immediately disposed and go in landfill and produce fragments are packaging. So it is important to try to reduce some way packaging. I am old enough to remember that in the first part of my life, the world was not made on plastic.
Right, it was paper and glass and other stuff.
Yes, other stuff, glass. But I remember that milk was in glass bottles, water was in glass bottles. Plastic began to be extremely important after the 60s, more or less, of the last century, and then increased exponentially, and now is the most important material in our life. But I think that it would be possible and is necessary to try to go back and to try to use alternative materials like paper, like glass. We can eliminate completely. I think that in any case, this type of intervention should be realistic. In some cases, plastic cannot be eliminated, even in disposable items. If we think, for example, to sanitary items, for this type of things, plastic is perfect because it's very hygienic, can be sterilized easily. After the use, is eliminated. So for sanitary item, plastic is perfect. But for domestic uses, for example, we can use something different. So it is important, first of all, to reduce the use of macroplastic. More difficult will be, for example, the elimination of fibers, because I don't think that now we can drastically reduce the use of synthetic textiles that are part of our life. Everything we use is totally or partly artificial.
Yeah, that's true. It's very difficult.
And this will be difficult. I think that this could be, some intervention could be possible with some different technology in washing machine, with some system of filtering and retaining in washing machine, and then disposing this amount of fiber that will be collected in some more safe way, not discarding in surface water, but
you would
composting.
probably have to classify washing machine water as a hazardous waste and require filtration.
Yes.
Then you would have just like we have a lint trap, we would also have a microfiber or plastic trap.
Yes.
Yeah.
This could be another possible intervention.
Okay.
About tire debris, I don't know what we can do, because wheels of car, we should use less car. This is another possibility. This will be also positive for many other aspects: less energy consumption, less air pollution. But tire debris are another relevant source of this type of material. So there is no one intervention, no one measure capable to solve the problem. It's important a complex policy of several types of intervention, in some cases acting at the origin when the material is produced, by reduce the amount of this material that is introduced in our life. Other measures should be effective downstream. So like filters or something like. There are different measures that should be taken into account, considered, implemented.
Well, very good. Marco, what is the best way for people to learn more about these three types of pollution and to figure out ways to stop them?
Which is the best way? It is not easy, because there is a huge amount of fake news in this field. The best way should be being capable to select among the enormous amount of information the correct information. I can make an example. Everybody knows that in the middle of the ocean, for example, of the Pacific Ocean, there is an area where the marine currents concentrate. And on the web, there are many websites that are talking about the plastic islands in the ocean. And the idea, the message that is transmitted is that there is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean an island where people can walk, that is formed by millions and millions of tons of plastic. And this is a fake news. Because it is true that in the middle of the ocean, there is an area where plastic are concentrated. But the concentration of plastic is of 70 grams per square kilometer.
Oh, that's nothing.
70
very dispersed.
Is enormous if you consider that this is in the middle of the ocean, thousands of kilometers far from any source, and is an area extended like Texas, more or less. So it's astonishing, but it's not an island where people can walk. So it's an area when
Don't they call it a gyre, the Pacific gyre of garbage, like the garbage patch or gyre?
Yes, but looking in internet, this is an example that I tested personally some days ago. Looking in internet, you can find hundreds of newspaper articles, websites talking about this plastic island, and only one scientific article that explains exactly what it means. Every 100 fake news, you can find one scientific correct news. So it is very difficult to select the real correct news in a forest of fake news. And the same with microplastic. There is an alarm. Microplastics, there is danger for human health from microplastic. There is microplastic in the salt that you use at home in your... yes, this is true. Microplastic are in the sea, and this is normal that in the salt that you use for your dishes, there is some fragment. But if you eat some fragment of plastic, it's absolutely safe. That doesn't matter. It's not dangerous at all. So it is important to understand what we are talking about. Plastic exists, but there is a lot of fake news.
Have people been tested, and has plastic been found in people's stool, or just in their blood, or in their tissues?
In the blood, I don't. No. In our digestive tract, for sure, we have some plastic. We ingest some plastic every day, because microplastic are present in several types of material of food that we. So there is no doubt that we every day can ingest 2, 3, 10 small particles of microplastic. But it's impossible that they go in our blood because they remain in our digestive tract, cannot cross the cell membranes, and so are eliminated through the fishes without any type of danger.
Okay.
The problem, as I told before, what we don't know is the smaller particle, the nanoplastic, can cross membrane, cellular membrane, and enter in the blood. We don't know. This we don't know.
Okay. Well, very good. Marco, thank you for coming on the podcast. And okay. I know it's not good news, but at least you're able to inform people about what's going on. So thank you for all that you do.
Okay, thank you.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.